Now here with me again is Jason Zinoman, a critic at the New York Times who writes about both theater and comedy, and also he is the author of Letterman, The Last Giant of Late Night, which is just about out on paperback.
That's right.
That's right, that's right. And in the hot seat is my sometimes guest co-host, Jesse Green, co-chief theater critic of the New York Times. And we had you in today because you wrote a wonderful think piece in this week's New York Times, The Agony and the Ecstasy of Writing Negative Reviews.
Well, I didn't mean to write a wonderful think piece. I meant to write a terrible think piece.
Well, a pensive think piece, and this was inspired, as it happens, not that you haven't written other negative reviews, but by a negative review you wrote of Escape to Margaritaville, a Jimmy Buffett musical that just opened on Broadway, which you did not like.
I didn't like it, and I wrote a very straight-ahead pan. Not a negative review, a pan. We all get the difference, you know. I would say it maybe was all the way over to scathing. I'm not sure. But what happened is, of course, there were tons of comments. Jimmy Buffett has a huge fan base. He's, you know, one of the most successful singer-songwriters of our time. Got to give him credit for that. And his fans are called parrot heads, and they were none too pleased. And let it be known, as is their right, often in comments on the Times website and elsewhere. And so the editors thought, well, you know, when we have an audience engaged in this way, let's keep them engaged and provoke them further. So they asked me to put myself on the line.
You told me that people also tweeted you saying, oh, why don't you chill out and have a drink, and things like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that's happened because of social media and because of the lessening of the understanding of the framework of criticism and what critics do and how a review by a professional journalist is different from an opinion you might have on anyone might have, which is quite valid. But they're different things, and you get a kind of response that is as if you actually came to their home and murdered their dog.
And attacked them, yes.
No, their pet.
Yeah.
It's worse than if you attacked them. And they feel that they need to respond in kind to kind of balance things out.
So, Jason, what is the responsibility of a critic? What is the responsibility of a for real critic? You know.
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, people should read this story.
Yes.
So Jesse wrote a great piece, and I think it's more necessary than ever before because in a lot of ways, I think negative criticism is under threat, and critics are increasingly, I'd be curious to hear if you agree with that, but are incentivized away from writing that kind of review. But I think, you know, Jesse articulated it really well, which is criticism is a branch of journalism. It's a pursuit of truth, and in this case, and I'm paraphrasing, but you're reporting on your own thoughts and feelings. If you lied about your own thoughts and feelings, if to avoid criticism, or to be more diplomatic, or to do whatever, people are going to stop trusting you. And when people don't trust you to report accurately on your own feelings, you're useless as a critic.
Also, I think something that's begun to disappear is the idea that you can enjoy reading opinions that differ from your own and, in fact, learn from them. Not necessarily, no one who loves Margaritaville is going to learn to hate it because they read my pan. But if they read enough of my reviews, they'll know kind of what my take is on things, and it will help them define their own taste. Or if I do my job well, it can. I grew up reading a lot of critics, some of whom wrote loathsome stuff. John Simon is an example. And I would read that stuff, some of it virulently homophobic, and I was a little gay boy, and I still ate it up. I understood where he was coming from, and he was such a good writer.
He is a good writer.
I could put that in a context and learn from him, even though I disagreed with him. That seems to be disappearing. And you mentioned disincentivizing very negative reviews, the social atmosphere. And that is something I totally feel because I'm a snowflake. I really oughtn't to be a critic because I'm so thin-skinned and because a lot of the people out there are now, in essence, Trump.
But that was a bold thing that you said in the piece, and I've heard you say this before, that you're thin-skinned, which for a critic is sort of a transgressive thing to confess to. Because, in particular, look, Jesse won't say this because he's, believes you dish out, you could take it, but being the chief theater critic of the New York Times, you've always taken a huge amount of heat.
Yes.
A huge amount of heat from all sorts of different kinds of people. But now, in the age of social media, I can't even imagine the amount of heat you take on an average review.
Well, I don't, honestly, I try to limit what I take in from that because it's not helpful. The smartest responses won't be phrased in those ways. So I get those via an email or sometimes on my Facebook page, although they found my Facebook page now, and that's filled with, you and your Yale degree talking down to us. It's like, oh, please.
Talking down to us. I have to say, I think you like Margaritaville better than I did, but
well, what's your pan?
Well, no, I mean, my pan's not interesting because I'm not in your position, except to say that I think it's so important that you're doing what you're doing in an age where so many people are operating below the level of their own intelligence to make a buck, and that that's a problem.
I do want to say that I don't tend toward the scathing when something's just bad. When something's bad, but I can appreciate the intentions of the author or the artists, or there's mitigating factors of some kind, for me, I will look for those things to say as well as genuinely criticizing. But when I get the whiff, as I got a very powerful alcoholic whiff off of Margaritaville, of cynicism, it puts things into a different category. I am not obligated to promote the business of Broadway. Look, many people will love the show.
Yes.
That has to be acknowledged, and they should. I'm not troubled by people enjoying things I don't like. I wonder why they're so troubled about my not enjoying something they do like.
But I think it's also worth mentioning, and Jesse does, that, look, negative reviews sting, and artists spend years putting this stuff together. Critics, and Jesse is, one of them, shouldn't take this lightly, and he doesn't. And some critics have not over the years have said they don't think about this, but I know it's true. It also has an impact on box office. This is a heavy responsibility to write reviews for a place like the New York Times. That said, it doesn't mean we don't have an obligation to write negative. If we don't write negative reviews, then you can't trust what we're going to say.
Yeah, I feel worse about reviews that come from the New York Times. I'm not going to name names, but where there's a work which I feel comes from the soul of the artist, and then it doesn't work out, and then you're obligated to not like it. Whereas I didn't feel that this musical Margaritaville was coming. The heartfelt song Margaritaville perhaps comes from Jimmy Buffett's soul, but I didn't feel that the show
it's a corporate creation of the enterprise that creates resorts and all kinds of other things around the world, and good for them. He has a net worth of $500 million or something like that. I don't know why all these people are so furious about the potential that some extra million might not come to him because of my review. But be that as it may, no one is saying you can't enjoy this show. I'm just telling you I didn't. Here's why, and you can place yourself on the rainbow of appreciation based on knowing where I am.
You were on the end of this because you were assigned by the New York Times to write the review for Hugh Jackman in The Last Showman.
Or The Greatest Showman.
The Greatest Showman, which I think you dealt with very decorously, but you didn't particularly like it. You did not particularly like it, and I think you heard about that, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I mean the thing is, I wrote a negative review of The Greatest Showman, and like a lot of critics. And the review became a massive hit, and people loved it. The movie, I'm sorry, gave a massive hit. And the Times actually wrote a story about the kind of incongruity between the critical reception and the audience reception. And I got some letters. I got one letter from an incredibly articulate high school student in New York who said, at my high school they teach you that art matters, and I read your review of The Greatest Showman, and you clearly are not capable of understanding how great this was. And then she excoriated me very articulately for 2 pages. And at the end of it, it was moving to me. And I thought, I did my job. Because as Jesse says in his piece, fighting about art is part not only is it part of the fun of it, but it shows that there's something serious at stake. Here was a person who cared so passionately about hating my review that she not only wrote this response, but sort of defined her own aesthetic in opposition to mine, which is exactly how it should work. That's how, like when Jesse grew up reading John Simon, or I have people I grew up reading who I also disagree with. I learned what I thought in opposition to what critics did. So there is an element of criticism that we're the kind of clown in a dunking booth. We're supposed to be that.
But only with negative reviews. Nobody's complaining very hard at you when you rave about something.
Well, they do quietly. See, I think about this a lot. That I actually never really am angry with a critic who doesn't like something that I like. Mm-hmm. But I am angry with a critic who overpraised something I buy a ticket to, and I said this is complete. And most people I know, and I have a bias. I have a lot of critic friends who see a lot of culture, are actually more upset by a positive review of something.
I go, Mr. X strikes again.
I guess that's true, but I don't hear from them as much and not as virulently. But you brought up something I think is worth mentioning, which is many people wrote to me complaining about something they feel a critic ought to do that I did not do, which is to report on the response of other people in the audience. So you've gotten these emails and things like that where they say, well, everybody else in the audience was having a good time. They were standing up at the end, spontaneous standing ovations and laughing like crazy throughout the whole thing, and you ignored all of that. Now, but let's look at that for a second. I'd like to ask Jason, because I don't know what the answer is. What do you feel about that criticism?
I think if that was our job, we would just be reporters reporting what the audience said. We would have no use. I mean, I'd be curious, because this is to your point. One of the many kind of interesting, provocative lines you is your kicker, the last line, where you say the job is to be a theater snob, which is, I think, in this age, actually a very bold thing to say.
Yes, my editor called me and he said, I love this piece. Are you sure you want to say that as your last line? And I said, is there something wrong with it? He said, no, it's very strong, but you're going to have that hung around your neck for the rest of your life. And he's right.
More power to you, Jesse Green, co-chief theater critic of the New York Times. I was just thinking, you must go to comedy things all the time where they're laughing and hooting and raving, and you're thinking.
You learn you can't trust the audience response.
What do you write in your notebook when I write, help me, help me? what kind of things do you write? If you take
kill me.
Kill me,
yeah.
Okay.
All right, very good. It's so lovely to see you, Jesse.
Nice to be on this side of the table.
Thank you, Jason. I look forward to the return of both of you very soon.